Like many of us, I was not born a vegan or an animal rights activist. I grew up in a rural farm community, and my neighbors raised cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs. And I was vice president of my 4 H club, and I showed my goats and my horses at the county fair. And you might remember the story of the girl who didn't want to sell her 4 H goat Cedar to slaughter in the resulting 500-mile hunt by police to seize Cedar and ensure his death. In this situation, the fair and the 4 H tried to make out the child to be the villain, placing the organization's interests above compassion and respect for a child's change of heart and moral growth. If this child were to go on to veterinary school, she would see the same pattern of institutional betrayal repeated in the veterinary profession. Despite my upbringing in 4 H, various life circumstances led me to become an animal rights activist. But my animal advocacy took a turn in 2020. I was growing increasingly critical of animal agriculture practices more publicly. My colleagues told me I really should shadow a livestock veterinarian so I would know what I was talking about. I was naive to the level of fear the industry could foster against those they saw as a real threat. I asked a shadow livestock veterinarian on a veterinary Facebook group while simultaneously posting on my public page information critical of animal agriculture. Then my colleagues showed me this meme going around from the vigilant administrators of veterinary Facebook groups. It says, "Beware, Crystal Heath is a self-proclaimed animal rights activist. She has an agenda that doesn't include anything positive for our profession. We recommend you block this person, Crystal Heath." Part of bridging the divide is understanding this backlash veterinarians face for speaking out and how we can help support them and make the institutional changes needed to prevent retaliation against those who support animal rights campaigns. This inspired the founding of our honor. Many veterinarians reached out to me and said that they had experienced various forms of the same thing, and we realized we needed to do something about this. Our honor's mission is to support and empower veterinarians, veterinary students, and animal professionals to create more ethical systems and work for the best interests of others, no matter their species. Glenn Greenwald was fascinated by the story and covered it as the last article he wrote for The Intercept, and he had me on his show. This email was sent around to my veterinary colleagues, and it says, "Given her involvement with extreme activism, we believe her intentions are to gather information she can use against the industry. We recommend spreading the word to your veterinary contacts in California using private, members-only channels." And you might be thinking, my God, what kind of extreme activism were you involved in? Which just shows why this type of attack works so well. I was not burning down slaughterhouses. I was merely putting words on the internet. Because veterinarians are the authorities when it comes to animals, if we were to speak out against animal agriculture, that would threaten the most powerful and abusive industry on the planet. The American Association of Swine Veterinarians has even banned several of us from joining their organization. Animal agriculture corporations strategically wield the veterinary profession's moral authority to advance policy and legislation that benefit corporate interests over the interests of animals. So why aren't there more animal rights activists fighting back? The profession is homogenous, 93.3% white, and it has all the problems that come with a white supremacist profession. The field is incredibly unwelcoming to those of different backgrounds and beliefs. People who aren't willing to assimilate to this culture usually self-select against entering the profession. Shame, imposter syndrome, and perfectionism are rampant, making us very guarded against criticism, especially from those we view as outsiders. This is the result of widespread institutional betrayal. So what is institutional betrayal? This is a fairly recent concept described by psychologist Dr. Jennifer Freed, referring to an institution's failure to respond to wrongdoings committed upon those who serve or are served by the institution. Retaliation against whistleblowers is a classic example. But here's a veterinary example. During her 2018 clinical year at Auburn University, Dr. Stephanie Frazel and her classmates were to practice surgery on a bull named Fred and then kill him. She had a panic attack thinking about having to do this to Fred and didn't want to participate. The faculty scolded her, threatened her with expulsion, and her peers mocked her. She failed the class. Schools teach students that animal rights is a foolish perspective that worsens animal welfare and poses a threat to our ability to help animals. This slide is from an undergraduate animal ethics course at UC Davis. The professor told the students this material would be presented in a neutral way. However, they showed this highly biased film by Vice about DXC. When I asked the professor to show the class DXC's response to this film, she refused. The unwillingness to show an alternate viewpoint is an example of institutional cowardice. This slide I obtained from a college animal science course, and it says, animal rights activists often misinform the public, use violence and stunts, and to receive donations for their organizations to help animals. And this is an example of DARVO. DARVO stands for Deny, Attack, Reverse, Victim, and Offender. On an individual basis, we know this is how narcissists deal with criticism, and Dr. Jennifer Freed describes institutional DARVO, and we see this in responses of corporations and organizations accused of misconduct to avoid accountability. And it's gaslighting. They deny allegations, attack the whistleblower, paint the whistleblower as the offender, and they themselves as the victim. Historically, veterinary students had to kill their surgical patients as part of their training. They would get a dog, perform one or more surgeries on them, and then euthanize them afterwards. Dr. Bernard Rowland, in his book Animal Ethics, talks about a student who beat a dog with a sledgehammer and then spent the semester repairing the damage. He received an A. That kind of thing isn't done anymore, but killing animals as part of surgical training is still done in many schools. And with this comes a lot of shame and trauma, as well as harm towards animals. And research has shown students are initially uneasy about these labs, but afterwards they justify it to themselves, saying it was a valuable learning opportunity. To have someone tell them killing animals is wrong creates a lot of defensiveness. Fortunately, many schools are transitioning away from harmful training methods towards spending more time using models and learning on patients who actually need surgery under the guidance of experienced surgeons. And this is me and Dr. Castillo in Mexico, and me in Fiji and the Navajo Nation teaching students on patients who benefited from our care. But animal agriculture publications like this use this opportunity to deploy DARVO, denying harms, attacking activists, and portraying the school as the victim of activists. And some buy into this false narrative. I talked to CSU students who actually believed that they were missing out on valuable training. I told them I did not participate in any terminal surgeries in school, and today, surgery is my favorite part of practice. Harm is not required. And this is a brilliant essay written by a medical student who explores the pressures that exist within medical culture to harm those we should be serving. Students are conditioned and acutely vulnerable to the pressures to become complacent in condoning practices and systems that cause harm. This is grooming, and physicians tortured people at Guantanamo Bay, committed so-called mercy killings during Hurricane Katrina, and many students were taught how to do pelvic exams on anesthetized women who could not consent. During World War II, 7% of doctors became members of the SS compared to less than 1% of the general population. And in her research, she discovered that most doctors who participated in the Holocaust, which is the greatest act of governmental betrayal upon humans, were regular people who believed that they were doing an unpleasant but morally correct and necessary job. New doctors rapidly came to view the culture of the camps as an unchangeable fact. Likewise, veterinarians view animal exploitation on farms and in labs as an unchangeable fact. In medicine, We mislead ourselves by using euphemisms. We say sacrifice and euthanize when we refer to killing. We learn detached professionalism to avoid burnout. We are socialized to obey hierarchies and respect our professors and residents and attendings and trust their judgment and follow orders. We have pride in our universities and depend on them for our income and career advancements. We've invested hundreds of thousands into our education. These things make us reluctant to publicly expose or even acknowledge wrongdoing. To cope, medical students become less empathetic and less ethical as they progress through medical school. Likewise, veterinary students have been shown to have stunted moral development. And this is an actual veterinary school project where a student drowned pigs in foam to see if it was a viable mass killing method. This student project looked into mass killing with gasoline engine exhaust. And all of these students received recognitions and awards. They were solving an unpleasant problem in what they viewed as a morally justified way. The need for new methods of mass killing, according to them, is an unchangeable fact. No one is allowed to ask whether they are solving a problem that should even exist in the first place. So these students get rewarded, and conscientious objectors like Dr. Fraisel get failing grades and ridicule. And this sets the stage for one of the most prominent instances of institutional betrayal in the veterinary profession. In early 2020, when COVID-19 first hit, slaughterhouse workers started getting sick, and slaughter capacity was reduced by 45%. The pig industry operates on a just-in-time model, and pigs were quickly outgrowing their pens. With no empty shackles on the slaughter lines, they decided to kill them en masse. One method was to seal up barns, pump in heat and steam, and watch as the animals inside died after many hours. Matt Johnson recorded this horrifying footage at Iowa Select Farms, and the public was outraged. But some veterinarians were suspicious and thought it was just animal rights propaganda. Iowa Select Farms communication director Jen Sorensen took to the media to calm the public and let them know that death by heat stroke was a veterinarian-approved method of mass killing. Veterinarians realized this wasn't just animal rights propaganda. This method of killing was listed in the AVMA's newly published guidelines for the depopulation of animals. And several of us co-founded Veterinarians Against Ventilation Shutdown. All we wanted was for the AVMA to reclassify death by heat stroke as a not recommended form of mass killing. It's a pretty conservative ask, and we got more than 1,600 veterinarians to sign on to our petition. But the two petitions presented to the AVMA House of Delegates were both rejected. The AVMA's director of the Animal Welfare Division was concerned about the fact that heat stroke-based killing might leave the guidelines. She is a member of the Scientific Advisory Committee of United Egg Producers and Dean Foods Animal Welfare Science Council. And during an animal mortality management conference in North Carolina last year, she called on a friendly audience to help her find evidence to support leaving this method in the guidelines. She says, "One item I'd like to place some emphasis on for this room, since I feel you are a little more friendly of an audience than I've had the opportunity to present for over the past couple of years, is we need data from you. And I know you've seen some presented here. Even if it's not published, if it's a case report, proprietary data, or unpublished data, the panel needs it. Some of these methods are at risk of leaving the guidelines. I think you probably have an idea of what those methods might be. We need data to support them staying in the document." And contrast this with Dr. Daniela Castillo during the 2022 AVMA convention in Philadelphia. She stood on the public sidewalk outside with her sign explaining what it means to be a vegan veterinarian and encouraging her colleagues to advocate against heat stroke-based killing. An older, male-presenting veterinarian shoved her from behind and told her to get out of the way. Security followed us around and would line up at the back of each talk we attended, making us feel very unwelcome. A few months later, several of us were banned from attending the AVMA's Humane Ending Symposium so that producers could have a safe space to discuss mass killing without fear of reprisal. But these were people in a position of power and wealthy producers, and we were the ones facing reprisal, having been banned and silenced with nothing economically to gain for it. Cargill, the largest agribusiness company in the world, and Charles Rivers Labs were both sponsors of the symposium. I was also banned from attending the AVMA's recent legislative fly-in a few months later. And the AVMA changed its House of Delegates manual to prevent future petitions like ours from advancing, and many delegates were unaware this change occurred. Brene Brown summarizes what leads to such institutional betrayal. She says, "When the culture of any organization mandates that it is more important to protect the reputation of a system and those in power than it is to protect the basic human dignity of the individuals who serve that system or who are served by that system, you can be certain that the shame is systemic, the money is driving ethics, and the accountability is all but dead." If you think back on any major scandal fueled by cover-ups, you'll see the same pattern. And the restitution and resolution of cover-ups almost always happens when one person steps outside their bunker and speaks their truth. But the one who speaks out must be prepared to deal with Darvo tactics and institutional betrayal. The resolution comes from institutional courage, public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, apology, and creating structures to prevent future retaliation of those who voice concerns, or else these betrayal wounds fester and harm continues. And we must address the systems of reward that allow harm to continue. In the case of killing with heat stroke, it was industry-funded research performed at an industry-funded public research university that was used to put this brutal method in the guidelines. Those guidelines were then used to give public funds back to the very industry that created this policy. So, what happens when an institution fails to acknowledge wrongdoing and betrays those who refuse to be intimidated? They regret it. Those betrayed make taking down the org their new favorite hobby. They find allies. They publish stories in the media, many stories. And the international veterinary community also published several articles criticizing the AVMA, as did our own veterinarians. So the AVMA's tail was between its legs. And when an org refuses to take accountability, you cannot engage with them or their flying monkeys as if they are good faith actors. Don't waste your time and energy. You have to go around them. Dr. Barry Kipperman published this commentary in the British Veterinary Journal because the AVMA Journal would never publish such a thing. And this painstakingly detailed academic article explains what happened and what the AVMA must do to move forward. And all this for something that should not have ever been allowed in the first place, especially when there are many less brutal alternatives available, which just illustrates how hard it is to stop harmful policies once they have been codified. This month, at the AVMA convention, sustainability and the greening of veterinary practices was discussed. Our honor submitted this executive summary to our delegates, highlighting the need for veterinarians to lead the transition towards more slaughter-free forms of nutrient production. Activists once again demonstrated outside the convention. This time, it was to raise awareness about the cruelty of pig slaughterhouse gas chambers as the Humane Slaughter Panel is currently reviewing their guidelines. Many veterinarians talked with activists and even took selfies. But still, one veterinarian said, "This doesn't happen. The footage isn't real." Despite coverage in the New York Times, Wired Magazine, and other outlets, and the fact that more than 150 veterinarians signed on to our statement. This is the classic deny and attack. So we still have a long way to go to build the institutional courage needed within the veterinary profession. Dr. Martha Smith Blackmore is one AVMA delegate who posted this photo on her Twitter account with activists in January. At the House of Delegates meeting a few weeks ago, she discussed the need to address intensive animal agriculture. She shared our executive summary with her reference group, and soon there will be more in positions of leadership empowered to speak out. While we love to shame and punish those individuals who are committing harm, this just plays into Darvo tactics. It gives them more opportunity to play victim. Really, we need to support and encourage those who refuse to betray their conscience and refuse to be intimidated. Our honor hopes to do this by telling their stories, building a supportive community, and offering scholarships for courageous students. Ultimately, we want more veterinarians to join the movement for animal rights. In 2022, Our Honor and Veterinarians Against Ventilation Shutdown both made the Animal Agriculture Alliance major animal rights activist group's activist web. The 2023 activist web was rebranded as the Extremist Groups web, and you can clearly see much improvement in bridge building and collaboration. We have made some great connections this past year, and if you aren't connected, please get in touch. We would love to see even more lines, and I hope one day we can add even more people and institutions to this web, and someday even get the AVMA up here. One veterinarian I talked to said the reason she went vegan is because a client spoke to her about it and handed her a pamphlet. So I encourage you to talk to your veterinarians while respecting their time. Bring our materials and politely let them know about Our Honor and these issues. The more they are exposed to these by their clients, the more they will have to listen. We provide many gateways to activism, and one of these issues will hopefully pique their interest. One day, every veterinary clinic will be a community space advocating for the protection of all species. Veterinarians give the animal rights movement the legitimacy it needs when we bring our campaigns to the media and to legislators. We need veterinarians to be allies in this movement. So, do you have a campaign that needs a veterinarian's moral authority? Please reach out, and please sign up for our newsletter and find us on social media. Thank you very much.